This year I've attended 13 agricultural shows where I've given out gospels and tracts. And something highly unusual has been happening, which sort of pushed me in this direction today. Young children have been coming up to me and people on the stand and asking for Bibles. That's never happened to me. And they've been seeking it for themselves. I'll think of one girl in particular. She was on the other side of the aisle and she veered off and did a U-turn and came back and asked for a Bible. In the past, I've had children who don't know what a Bible is, and they come and ask for one. This has been happening not just with me, but it's been happening with Bernard down in the south, and it's been happening with Matthew and Rosie up in the north. I'll think of one in particular. It was the last one, the ploughing match at Brailsford, where they bring, it's in a traditional type show. They tend to bring the children from the local schools to the ploughing match. It's a very rural community, and they came down in lines, and one of them veered off, as they have been doing, and said, "Could she have a Bible?" Anyway, we ended up giving 63 out that day because all 3 coach loads did exactly the same thing. With this in mind, I'd like to go to our text today, but I want to use just one verse in there, which is verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. These children are looking, in my opinion, for something solid in their lives. One thing I have noticed is they're so confused. The world, the system, has bombarded them with what they can be or what they can do. These are little children. I'm talking probably between 6 and 8 years old, seeking the gospel. They're being taught they can be what they want. A boy can be a girl can be a boy, and much more. They're being exposed at a young age to things that should be nowhere near them. Is it a wonder that they're confused? But they are seeking. As parents and grandparents, as Christians, we should pray for them daily. I honestly believe they are seeking something solid that is true. A rock to stand on. They need the gospel. So today, with that in mind, I'm going to speak, as I said before, from Proverbs 22, verse 6, where it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." I think within this verse is a commandment, a warning, and an encouragement. A commandment about responsibility, a warning of the natural inclinations of a child, and an encouragement of what could be. Our world today is fraught with danger for our young ones. Where do you start? Television. Have you watched it? Social media is another, I don't really understand it, but children seem to be drawn towards it. And we have schools that would teach them more than they ought to be taught. A child's mind is filled daily with many vices. Vices founded on the things that are not of God. Things that would consume their time, their energy, and their thoughts. While all the time being constantly told that they can achieve, often given inspirations that they cannot and will not accomplish. It's their choice. It's up to you, they are told. All this being guided by the world in its unbelief. By the world in its unbelief, or even by churches who would teach folly and not gospel. Preachers, teachers who don't understand sin. How could they know the cross? How could they even teach? Think about it. Is it good guidance to ask a child what he wants? Say that again. Is it good guidance to ask a child what he wants? How can you train up a child in the way he would go if he gets to choose? I'm told it's called child-led learning. Not what my Bible teaches. The natural direction of a child the natural direction of a child will take, if left to itself, sin. It will veer towards sin. Anne just read verse 15 of Proverbs 22, where it says, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him." Train up a child. The words in our verse today mean to set them on a path that God wants, and that what he would want for them. Not to allow them to decide for themselves what is good for them. God's wisdom is in his word, not in the world and its ways. What is the answer? The answer is to teach them biblical truths. And we get more questions from that. Who would teach them, you may ask? I would say godly parents and churches. Godly parents and churches that would teach that a person's natural state is sinful. That there is sin in the heart of every child. And that they didn't learn it, but that they were born with it. Parents and churches that understand the need for divine intervention and the transforming power of the gospel. Parents that understand a need for a new heart through God's grace. A need for self-denial and a hatred for sin. Parents also and teachers also who have a understanding that their teaching or guidance has no saving power within it, but only by God's grace for these children to be saved. A good question at this point would be, is this verse a promise? If you turn If you train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Does it mean if you train up a child in God's ways that that child will be saved? Many of you in this congregation today will know the answer to that. For I have observed in the time as a believer many families who have trained and versed well their children, yet still some of them go astray. Sometimes all of them go astray. And some stay as the Lord's. We must, I think, understand the book of Proverbs at this point. It is a book of wisdom literature. It's a compilation of wise sayings. It teaches how a person should live their lives and how they do live their lives. We must understand that Proverbs are not all promises and guarantees. They are principles to follow. They focus on the general rule, not the exceptions. Interestingly, as I looked at this, when I found the exceptions, most of those exceptions I found could be answered from the book of Ecclesiastes or Job. Our verse today suggests that a child learns at an early age. Our verse today suggests that what a child learns at an early age will impact their entire life. I tried to think of an example of this. I knew an elderly person who had dementia. He could not remember much at all. Couldn't remember his name. He couldn't remember who I was. Quite often he didn't know who I was. Didn't know where he lived, or much at all. But he could sing a hymn. He could sing a hymn without the aid of a hymn book. Hymns that he learned as a child. That's a lesson. What you teach as a child will remain with them, even when you're old and have dementia. One thing we must also remember: salvation is not dependent on our parenting skills or the quality of it. When I give out those gospels at shows, I'm sowing a seed. When you teach children God's way, you also are sowing a seed. Salvation is of the Lord by His grace. Salvation is of the Lord by His grace. When you train up a child in the way he would go, he would only go one way, with his natural state, which he is born with. Train up a child how he would go would be folly. Remember the verse 15? Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. Teach them the gospel. As Christians, as parents, as a church, we must teach our children God's ways. Teach biblical truths. Teach them the path, the direction set by God that they should go. And importantly, we should pray constantly for God's intervention in their life. Pray for him to intervene and do what we cannot do through our own efforts. Do this while fulfilling our role teaching a child God's ways. Pray that God would save them. And an important thing I think is really important, which comes to me after reading up on this subject. Remember also to choose wisely those who would teach those children. Examine that person well, for these children are precious to our Lord. Some of you might be thinking, oh, what's this got to do with me today? My children have grown and have moved on. You may not even have children. In your church family, there are children. Children who would see your ways, your life. They see how you act and conduct yourself. They hear your voice and what you speak of. The Lord has placed children amongst our fellowship after many years of praying for them. Many years. He has sent the gift of youth. Let's train them well in the ways of the Lord. Pray that the Lord would save them. All the time remembering, if you leave a child to go in the way he would go in his fallen state, or leave the child to the ways of the world, folly will come. We would not be, as parents and grandparents, or even as a church, following the commandment in our verse today. They need God's ways, gospel ways, not the world's ways. Guard our young from those who would teach them folly. Choose your teachers well. The Lord has seen fit to bless us with children. Let's teach them well. Let's learn from this small verse that tells us to train up a child in the way he should go, because of the way he would go with his own nature would be folly.